Lex, hello. Welcome to the Home to Self podcast. I am so excited for you to be here. And for everyone tuning in, thank you for dropping in as well. Thanks for tuning into another episode. We're excited to chat with you today about microdosing, about emotions, about healing, and all the things really of this beautiful self-discovery, self-healing journey that so many of us are on. And I am just so excited to have you on specifically because you are someone I love so much. And you're also just doing such beautiful work in the world. And I feel like you're just such an embodiment of really alchemizing your emotions and turning them into this creative fuel to like create a life that feels truly true to you and also very just alive and rich. And yeah, you've just got so much creativity flowing through your veins always. And I'm like, that's so inspiring. And so I'm excited to chat with people a little bit about the tools that you use to help you access those states and how people can start to use that in their own lives, really, to create more authentic expression, more bring more art into the world, and also just like live in a way that is true to them. So I am going to pass it over to you, and I just want to hear a little bit about what is the work that you do? What is what you love to help people with? And then we'll get into your journey a little bit more.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's such an honor, and I know we were going to have a magical and flowing conversation as we always do. Yeah, my work has evolved and shifted so much since it started, but the core essence of what I do now is really focused on meeting our emotions where they're at and then using those emotions as guides and as the way into our next big, wildly bold step. And for me, it's really come to full circle with psychedelics because psychedelics are non-specific amplifiers. They amplify what's present. And for so many people who don't have a relationship with their emotions, the first time they like microdose or take psychedelics, they feel so much. And it's almost like it's the first time they've felt alive. And
Mm.
which is such a testament to the work, right? Like to be a human is to feel, and to feel is to be alive. And that is such like a piece of being a human that I think we ignore a lot. We suppress, we do everything we can to not feel, we let fear stand in the way. And so for me, it's become such a let's look at emotions from a different perspective. Let's look at them as the way instead of what's standing in the way. Let's look at them as our wise parts of self that are actually calling us in to be with them, right? Like that's to me the most powerful work that you can do. And when you start to build emotional resilience and see that you can withstand all of the emotions that are thrown at you, you can do anything. Like you can be anyone, you can do anything. You can stand in the face of all of these emotions that you were once afraid of and actually step into your power in such an embodied way. And so that is such a big piece of my work. And I love microdosing for that reason because it amplifies that process so much that you're almost in it and you're like, I cannot ignore this. Like I am feeling so much. And for the first time in my life, it's like, here it's sitting in my face. It is just so close to my reality that I have to deal with it. So that's a big piece of it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think really the key piece being that like feeling is why we're here and it's what makes us feel alive, right? And that's all of it. And I think something I talk about a lot too is like increasing our capacity to feel, period. Like our ability to feel joy and ecstasy and bliss in these states that we really want to access is dependent on our capacity to be with the grief, with the despair, with the fears and the discomfort that come up with being human. And so I'm really excited to dive deeper into this and hopefully like help people change their relationship with emotions a little bit more because yeah, I do think they, we try to suppress them. And as a society, kind of that's what we're taught and modeled from a very young age is, we just don't want to feel. And there's so many distractions and ways to cope nowadays that kind of just dims the light on the entirety of the human experience, right? If we dim one side. So before we dive into all of that and how microdosing can help us to really amplify that and transform and alchemize these emotions into something good, tell us a little bit about your story because I know you've been through the ringer yourself. I know that you have yeah, just been on your own journey of really starting to see your emotions and your sensitivity as a superpower, but maybe it hasn't always been this way. So tell us a little bit about how it all started for you.
Yeah. I'm like, where do I begin? I think the starting point for me that I realized that I had to change the way I was living was during COVID. I was living by myself. I had done all the things, right? Like I had a job that I was making more money than I ever made before. I got a dog. I had this incredible apartment that like I still think about to this day, and I was miserable. And I was so sad. I was so alone. I was so in question mode of like there has to be more to this or I'm like literally not going to make it. And I was 25 sitting there looking at the rest of my life from this perspective. And it was almost like the little straw that I put on top of like the camel's back, right? To use the metaphor that opened up a door of like what if there is more? And so I started intuitively writing poetry. And I would sit in my room like on the nights that I had insomnia and couldn't sleep because I was so like anxious out of my mind, and I started putting words to what my internal experience was. And I didn't know why I was doing that. Like there wasn't really like a someone told me to do that. Like I just did that. And I would read back these poems and these journal entries that were incredibly poetic. And it was like I was turning the ugly, what felt so ugly, into something incredibly beautiful. And it wasn't for anyone. In fact, like to this day, I'm still terrified to show people those words because it was such a raw and emotional and vulnerable experience. And from that moment when I started doing that, everything changed. I moved across the country, quit my job that I was making so much money in to pursue more of what my heart wanted, which I think the moment I said yes to myself in that way, God, the universe, however we want to talk about it, was literally like, okay, if you're serious, here you go. And it was wild. Like the messages that were coming through were so clear. Like, get off birth control. It's disconnecting you from yourself. It's causing your depression. It's causing your anxiety. I went to Costa Rica. I had this like moment with meditation that I had never had before where I was like deeply connecting and feeling everything that was inside of me. I spontaneously got this job with a ketamine treatment company. I didn't even know what ketamine was or like what psychedelic healing was, but that was what was connected to me, just like all through serendipity, I'll say. And I finally got into, I was in this work, like sitting with this idea of, wait, could psychedelics really help me work through my lingering anxiety? And it was again like another door opened, like Pandora's box, and I said yes. And it was just so, it's so cool to look back on what I was doing. I was simply just following the nudges. Like my intuitive nudges were so clear. And for the first time in my life, I was saying yes to the things that I usually would have been so afraid of. And it was just like door after door after door after door. And I did ketamine treatment for like 6 months. It was the first time I had ever felt my anxiety was a separate piece of me. Like I could actually come away from it. And it was kind of at that moment when I was doing all of that work that I was like, wait, I think I'm supposed to be helping people through this. And so it kind of led me down like more paths of curiosity. Eventually, I'm skipping several parts, but eventually led me to a journey, a big journey, my first big journey with 5-MeO DMT, which is bufo, the toad, um, like venom. It's one of the most potent psychedelics that you can do. And at this point, I had only experimented with like small doses of psilocybin and ketamine. So I was like a psychedelic newbie. And I was like, go big or go home. I'm going to do the most potent psychedelic that exists. And though that was the most intense part of my journey, like I was not prepared. The space that, or the facilitator that took me through it was honestly didn't hold the space well. I had an intensely physical release. I had never experienced anything like that. It was almost like being psychedelically traumatized. And I came back from that experience feeling so confused. I didn't know what happened. I blacked out. I like knew I spent time like with God, but that was a foreign concept to me. And everyone I journeyed with had an incredibly different experience than I did. And then they sent us on our way. It was a 1 day retreat, and I was no longer who I used to be. And so I went through the next 6 months. I lived in San Diego at the time. I spontaneously moved to Colorado because I was like, well, I need to go be in isolation because I need to go figure out what that was. And yeah, for the next 6 months, I grappled with what it meant to be human and what all of this was. I was feeling everything. I was questioning everything. And at the end of that 6 months, when I feel like I finally like put my feet back on the ground, I sort of stood at the center of that experience and I was like, I'm definitely meant to be helping people in this journey. And that was when I signed up to be a psychedelic integration coach and found my way into that program also very spontaneously. And yeah, it was such an unconventional journey with psychedelics, I think. And there was a long period of time where I really regretted it and I was scared that I had like ruined my life because I was so confused. But it made me realize that proper preparation and integration and support and just people to talk to, even if you're not paying for help, can make all the difference. And I think genuinely working through that experience on my own, using all the tools that I had, that I knew of, and that I intuitively called on, I'm grateful it was me. And I'm grateful that I had that experience that I can now help other people through those processes. I don't really fully work with people who have done high dose integration journeys. That's not like my highest excitement. But I think microdosing has really showed me that you don't need a lot to get a lot. So that's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
origin of how it all happened.
Mm-hmm. So funny because my whole journey kind of started around COVID time too. I feel like for so
Mm,
many people, like that was a time of really being confronted with the reality of like, am I happy? Am I following my heart? I think for a lot of people, it kind of started around that time, and it's just so fun and honestly inspiring to hear your journey, because I think for people who do feel a little bit stuck still in that stage, in that phase of like kind of checking off all the boxes, but something still feels really off, just to hear someone else's story of how, and really to hear that it kind of started with you diving deeper into your own inner world and allowing yourself to express, and how the emotions ties into that. And we'll dive into that a little bit later, but it really is this like coming home journey, which is so fitting for this podcast too, of starting to kind of turn the focus inward, and how that begins this entirely new path of starting to trust and follow, whether you want to call it your own intuition, your higher self, or something even greater. But it really does start sending you on such a different path. And those first few years can be so messy, but like you look back
mm.
and you're like, oh, it makes sense. Like all these dots are connecting, and they've led me to my life, right? To not to what I was told I should want or should do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big piece of it, I think. And I remember, like, even when I was in San Diego before all of this part started, I would get really high. I smoked a lot of weed back then. I would call it cannabis now, but I smoked a lot of weed back then. And I would get really stoned. I'd put my headphones on and just sit in my bed and meditate for sometimes 3 hours. Like, because I was so used to having my light out and exploring my outer world, this was like the first time in my life that the light was turned in, that I was like, there is a galaxy in here. Like, there is so much to explore. Like, I could never get bored. I would do that near like probably 4 times a week. Like it was a really opening experience for me. I feel like, but it was also the prep work I needed for some of those bigger, higher dose journeys that I didn't know were coming. But ultimately, like I said, like I had the tools for it because I had done that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, even as you say that, I'm like, yeah, my first few years of actually turning inward were so I wanted so much alone time, which is, I mean, I am kind of an introvert in some ways, but also this period of my life, I was like, I wanted to say no to everything. And I just wanted to spend time like getting to know myself and exploring my own mind and my internal experience. And so yeah, I think that I think people can fear that when they don't understand what it is, but once you actually start to discover the worlds that live within you, and especially through psychedelics, like it's fascinating. You can genuinely spend your whole life, I think, internally and still not know it all. Like it's just like there's so much to explore, and it's actually really beautiful. And you can get, yeah, you can get so lost in a, I mean, in both ways, I guess, but in a beautiful way. There's just a lot there that I think you don't recognize until you start opening those doors. And so let's dive into microdosing a little bit further. And, for people who might be new, I think for the most part, my audience is familiar with microdosing. But for those who maybe haven't tried it, how would you describe what microdosing can offer us on a mental, emotional state? Like, what is it doing? What is it helping us with?
Yeah, I think microdosing, well, first of all, helps. Well, let me back up a little bit. If you don't know what microdosing is, it's taking small amounts of a psychedelic, typically on a protocol. So the protocol that I work with the most is the Fadiman protocol. It's you take 1 day on, 2 days off. You're taking like a tenth of a gram. It's not very much, and it's meant to not be hallucinogenic. You're not meant to see visually anything. You are meant to feel slightly different, and I think this is a difference that I'm tapping into, where most people would say you're not supposed to feel it at all, but like yes you are. You're supposed to feel a shift, but not so much that you can't take a work meeting, have a call with a friend, like go for a walk, and even drive a car. Like those things are still available to us when we're microdosing. We're not feeling so perceptually different, but it's so slight. I think it does so much. I think it really, really, like, really depends on your intention going into the work. For me, so much of it is about the emotions, but for some people, it's the first time they've ever been present with themselves. It's the first time that they feel that they have a breathing pattern. It's the first time that they look in their surroundings and realize that rushing to the next thing is actually not the most important thing for them in that moment. I think it so depends on the intention for that reason. If your intention is to be more present in your life, right, then ultimately you're going to notice more in your awareness. What I love so much about it is that it changes the way we think. So some of the things that happen when we take microdoses or psychedelics is it turns down what's called the default mode network. Basically a fancy way of saying your way of perceiving yourself in the world, basically your ego. It typically operates on autopilot. So we have these sort of running ideas about ourselves and how we relate to the world, and that is not in our conscious awareness. It's happening all super subconsciously. When you take a microdose, even at a small amount, that starts to quiet. And so it actually creates this opportunity where that part isn't so high, like loud, and you can have other thoughts. Now, while that's happening, other parts of the brain are turning on. And so it's almost like your brain is now talking to each other, like it to itself in a way that it hasn't before, which creates more creative thinking. It creates new thoughts. Like if you're someone who always thinks every single day that you aren't good enough and that you must continue to do more, and if you don't say yes to everything, that you're going to end up broken and alone and not have any money, and you see the cascade of effects. If that just turned down a little bit, imagine what that person could start to think. And I think that's why microdosing is so powerful, because it happens on such a subtle level that we can actually capitalize on those changes and on those new thoughts. So why the intention matters is because when we're going into it with intention, we're paying more attention to what's actually happening in our internal world, and then we're integrating that as we come out of it. And so the last piece of the microdosing puzzle that's so amazing is that it actually increases our neuroplasticity, which is literally just the brain's ability to rewire and strengthen neural pathways. They're not necessarily new neural pathways, they're just pathways that haven't really been used. So if you think of, my favorite analogy is the like fresh snowfall on a mountain. Before that snow falls, right? Like everyone's going down on the same tracks. If you're skiing, like everyone's following the same tracks because they've just been grooved in and they're the easiest, least resistance. When fresh snowfall falls, when you take a psychedelic, there are suddenly a plethora, there the opportunities are endless. So like you can then create your own path, and if you're serious about it and you want to integrate it and consistently work those neural pathways, you can actually change your brain. So in a lot of ways it creates the perfect conditions to change, but you also have to be willing to change. A lot of people come into this thinking that it's going to be like the magic cure, but if you're not willing to open yourself up to what is possible, and if you're not willing to continuously and consistently practice that, then you're going to end up on the other side, potentially more damaged, which I think is the shadow side of this work, right? Like it is, they're non-specific amplifiers, like they amplify what's present. And so if you go into the work like being like, I'm just wanting this to fix me, it's going to amplify that, and it's going to make that part of you incredibly present. And you have a choice there. You can either choose the other path of like, actually I'm not broken, or you can choose the path to be like, nothing is going to fix me, and then that will just further cement that that belief is true for you. And now your brain is like on all of these like essentially like steroids, they're not really, but they act that way, to be like, yeah, see, I told you I'm broken. Like there's a, it's a dance and that I think working with someone can be really helpful in, because having someone challenging that for you and with you is wildly powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, intention is really everything. And I mean, it's everything in life in general, right? Because I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that I see intention is like it's guiding our brain to see, right? Because there's so much information coming in at all times, and so our brain, our reticular activating system, is filtering things out based on importance of whatever it is we're looking for. And so I feel like that's kind of what like directs our focus, is our intention. And then when you use a psychedelic, it's even more important because it's amplifying what's there. And so when you have an intention to go in and be open to shifting some things and seeing some things from a more empowering perspective, it can really just guide you in doing that in such a beautiful way. And I mean, psychedelics have been the catalyst for my awakening, my healing, my expansion in so many ways, and continue to be such allies. But yeah, I think it's really beautiful to be having this conversation, because it is so important to go in with to go into it with intention, with guidance, with support, if that is something that you're needing. And I love that we're talking about microdosing, right? It doesn't need to be this entire like huge macro journey that is like really intense right off the get-go. But something that's is like seemingly pretty subtle can actually create such profound lasting change, and on so many different levels, right? Which is just wild. And so with that, I'm curious to hear a little bit about using it for creativity, because I know that that's kind of your magic as well, you know. And I think we hear about microdosing a lot within healing, and that is absolutely true. Obviously, there's a lot there, but how has it helped you in terms of creativity?
Yeah. It took me a while to get to this point for myself because I was very much on the healing journey. I like to say I'm healing from healing in this moment, but it can be serious. And I think a lot of people who start it, like we were saying earlier, like we want to just explore and see and figure out like what's there. We want to understand ourselves. Microdosing for me has become a creative, I'd say, gateway. And I think because I see it this way, because it amplifies what's present and it amplifies my emotional state. Preface here, I'm a very emotional person and I always have been. And so, actually, when I first started microdosing, I found it incredibly challenging because I, as someone who was very emotional, was like, I do not need more emotion. I need to figure out how to manage it, right? Which is where the magic happened, where I was like, oh, I think actually these emotions aren't bad. I've just labeled them that way myself and through society's eyes. But actually, my emotions are the driver of my creativity. Like anytime I am feeling, especially an emotion that's like really embodied and deep, my emotion, my creative brain is like content. Like yes, like we have something to do with this. It's like I love the saying that energy cannot be created or destroyed, it can only be transferred. And it's the exact this is the exact concept. It's like when we feel, it's a lot of energy, and we can either do something with that energy or we can hold it in, and it's going to manifest into something else. And for me it was anxiety, and for a lot of people it's anxiety. It's like a common experience that humans are having. But when we can learn to re-alchemize the emotions, the energy into something, and I'm talking like creative expression can literally be anything. It can be turning on a song and like letting your body just move, right? Like it doesn't have to be for people to witness. It doesn't have to be for money. It doesn't have to be a painting or a drawing. It can literally be anything. And so that's been a big piece of it for me is I was a dancer. So I think that comes up a lot for me where anytime I take psychedelics, my first initial like come up is like to move. Like I just want to like be with like what is there. And I held that back for so long that now that I'm able to express it, it is usually leading the way to more creative ideas. Like when I move the energy like almost rewards me and it's like, thank you. Like now we can continue on and move more and have more clarity. I think that's a big piece of it. I also think sort of what I was mentioning earlier of how like the brain is now talking to itself in a new way, that you're thinking a little bit more outside of the box, right? I think a lot of us are deeply creative, especially us deep feelers. Like we have so much, like feeling is creation, right? Like it literally is the same thing, but it has to go somewhere. Like we have to find ways to express it that feel good for us in order to like keep the juices flowing. That's how I like to think of it. So with intention, and when I go into microdosing or when I'm sitting with a client who's going into it with the intention of how can I create from this, it just happens naturally. Like a lot of my clients will start writing poetry and they're like, I've never written poetry before in my entire life, but words are so accessible to us and it's our we use them so often. It's our most direct way of communication. So like they start writing poems and they're like so amazed with themselves that they want to keep doing it. And it's like those are my favorite moments because it's like that's been living in you and now you're tapping into it and seeing how you can alchemize what is inside to something outside. And it doesn't have to be that, you don't have to be Picasso. Like you can literally, you can create whatever you want. Like you can create relationships, you can create meals, like anything.
Yeah. I mean, everything is creativity. Really, when you think about it, I think we've been sold, like I lived with the belief that I am not creative for so long because I wasn't creative in the sense of like an artist or a singer or musician or a performer or whatever, like very much not my natural state. But to think that everything is creation, like you're constantly creating, you're creating, you're communicating, you're using your words, you're creating art, you are creating a meal, you are creating a relationship, like you said. And so it's really beautiful to actually I love the connection there between using this life force energy, these emotions, right, that are just energy in motion, as fuel for the creation of your reality essentially, right?
Yeah, 100%. I also, it brings me back to if you've ever read the book Big Magic
Mhm.
by, oh, who is it by? It's by the woman who also wrote Eat, Pray,
Elizabeth
Love.
Gilbert,
Yes,
I think. Yeah.
that is correct. That book also gave me a really big understanding that creativity is also not even from us. Like we are not the source, right? Like God or universe is the source. However, we are the channel. And so the she tells this story in that book about how she had this idea for a book, like very specifically what the plot was, who the characters were, all of these things. Like she was incredibly specific and she chose not to write it. And then someone close in her circle literally wrote the book with the idea, like the same
It's
idea.
crazy.
And she didn't share that with them. Like it is just proof, and I'm sure there's so many other proof points of this, but it is just proof that like we have to also open the channel, right? Like so many of us say that like I'm not creative. I was just not I wasn't born that way. And I think more than anything it's like that's a sign that you're blocked. Like that you just get to open up and learn to open up the channel and see creation as, I mean, everything. It is everything.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I love that concept of how creativity just kind of it like lands in the right person at the right time, but then it's up to us to kind of take it and run with it and do something with it, or else it kind of, bounces around to someone else, to another channel that's open to receiving. And
Hmm.
and it's beautiful because like I feel like we get trapped in these very robotic ways of going through life, very like autopilot kind of lifestyle. Even our thoughts and our beliefs and our actions and everything, we kind of just go through the motions. And something that's really beautiful about psychedelics is they kind of pull you out of that, right? Because you are thinking different, which is influencing different feelings and behaviors and actions. And so it's just you're thinking outside of the box. And I think that has really helped me to actually open the channel, right? And
Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit more about that. Like, what does that, how can people start to play with their creativity and tap into that and move that energy to figure out kind of what their creative magic is?
Yeah. I think be open to it not looking the way you think it's going to look. That would probably be the first order of business. Like, really releasing expectations. I feel like since coming into the psychedelic world, I often look at life through the lens of ceremony and through this idea of we prepare for ceremony like very intentionally, right? Like we prepare our bodies, we prepare our spirits, our spirit, we prepare sort of all of the components of our being for this experience. And we set an intention, right? Which is different than an expectation. It's a surrendering, not a death grip. And even just to clarify on that, it's like an intention is coming from your soul, right? It's coming from your higher wisdom, your higher intuitive knowing, but it's also acknowledging that we're working with these medicines that have their own wisdom and their own intelligence. And if they think you need to see something before you're ready for the intention that you set, like you better believe that they're going to show you that. And I think seeing the world in this way and seeing creativity in this way is a big piece of it too. It's like have intention that comes from your higher self, right? Like actually know where you're going, bigger picture from a values perspective, but you don't know the path on how to get there. You don't know the how. In this case, in the creativity, you don't know the medium. Like you don't know any of those things. You just have to listen. So I love this like analogy with like thinking of life as a ceremony because it really puts more intention and attention on just being with what is present, right? Like that's a big piece of creativity in general. It's like creating what is present. Like you can't force yourself to create something that's not there. Like it's not going to feel good. It's not going to feel it'll be creation with the wrong source of energy. And so, yeah, as you're tapping into creativity, actually paying attention to your inner world is a big part of the experience. And that might literally be telling you to go for a walk. Like it might be telling you to go lay in the grass. And I think this is the part of creativity that people get so hung up on, is like they have a timeline of like, but I want to have, I want to be creating this thing by the end of the week. And I think in reality, oftentimes we have to prepare the channel, right, to receive the creative idea or to receive the creative energy that's going to move through us. And I feel like also something that I have really tuned into myself is not sitting on it for too long. Like when that creative idea sparks and you're working on this intentionally, like take action. Like find a way to take action almost immediately, because something that creativity often does, especially for people who are just sort of building this muscle, is it comes in waves, but it doesn't always stay. And that's our work, right? Like we have to build the capacity within ourselves to hold it for longer, but we don't have the capacity within ourselves to hold it for longer. It comes in these little, like, you've had it happen. It's like an idea hits and it's like it literally makes you feel alive, like you're like turned on by it basically. And then if you don't act on it, literally like being turned on, it goes away. Like it doesn't sometimes it doesn't come back either. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. More what I'm saying here is like take those moments and run with them. Strike while the iron's hot. If you feel that present emotion and it's sparking, like it wants to, like, I do this a lot because it's like it wants to move, like it wants to
Mm-hmm.
move forward. Do it. Like whatever it is, even if it's go for the walk, even if it's lay in the grass, even if it's like if you have a partner, it's like grabbing them and like making out with them, like whatever it is, that's the creative energy coming through. You have to trust that. And I think so much of the creativity work in general is like learning to trust, like not second guessing, right? Not prejudging yourself, because I think that's a big piece of it. And I think this is why microdosing works so well, because when we're on a microdosing protocol and we're actively doing it, our judgment towards self is lowered typically. So we're more likely to act. So if someone is actually wanting to do more creative work and their inner critic is just so loud, well, no wonder they're not going to get to it. Because think about creativity as a whole. It's often like the most creative things you see are things you've never seen before. Like they have not existed before. You've never heard that song before. You've never seen someone paint that way before, move their body like that before. Do you think if that person judged themselves before they did that thing that you would have ever seen that? Like it's the paradox, right? It's like you have to find your own self within that to be like, I am doing this thing because it feels good and it's present and nothing else matters around me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so beautiful because so many of these things are so interwoven and interconnected. And I love the idea of it being like a ceremony because it really, like, there's so much to say about being present. Like, I really believe, like you said, we're all creative. That is absolutely true. Right? We're literally creating life constantly with how we think, how we feel, how we act. And with that, it's like it's not about becoming more creative, it's more so about removing what's in the way, right? And so this again, like psychedelics help with this, but even any like mindful practice, anything like that, where you are quieting the noise so that you can tap into source intuition, creativity, and then the work becomes trusting that in each moment. And it's so true that like when it lands and it's that initial spark of like, ooh, like there's inspiration there. For me, like this is where I've gotten caught up most of my life, is like I wait too long and then immediately the fears kick in, the excuses, the fears, the judgment, right, of the mind, and it just clouds it. It makes it feel, it takes away that magic, and then I don't run with it, right? And so I love that. And I want to tie this into intuition, because something that I talk a lot with clients about, and that I know a lot of women out there are on, like the journey that they're on, is like to be able to be more trusting in themselves and in their intuition. And again, it pairs so beautifully, because I do think when you trust yourself more and you trust the downloads that come in, the creative hits that you get, and you actually run with them, then you start to create more lived proof that like, oh, my intuition is actually a channel for my authentic path and my creativity, and like what I'm here to, like how it's supposed to move through me and my unique perspective to create my unique flavor of this art. And so talk to us about strengthening your intuition, and maybe, yeah, if you've incorporated these tools to help you on that process, how have you done that?
Yeah, I think you hit it pretty spot on. Like intuition is really learning to build proof for yourself. And when I first started my own like spiritual work, I found it really valuable to actually approach it from a logical perspective. I before I was like sort of tapped into my spirituality, I needed a lot of logic for things to make sense. But I'm actually glad that I approached it this way because I think it's a great way to approach it. So if you're familiar with like the to be magnetic work, Lacey Phillips, like that was a big part of my process when I first started. And what I love that that program does is it forces you to write down when you feel your intuition nudge you, and then to write down what happens when you follow it, and to write down what happens when you don't follow it. And literally keeping a note in a notebook or in your phone of those moments of what happens when I follow that nudge. And typically the nudge is like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like I would get these random actually I have a story for this that really ties in well. I got
Yeah.
this nudge once to go to this coffee shop that I had never been to before in San Diego. And I always used to see it like on my walk, but I would go right and it was left. And so one day I was sort of standing on the corner doing this work and I was like, I kind of want to go to that coffee shop. And it didn't make sense. I actually had plans that day. So I should have followed just my normal path and left. I went to that coffee shop. I ended up bumping into this man who was so attractive, like so charismatic, like just really lit me up in a way that I hadn't been lit up before. I was very single at the time. And we ended up exchanging numbers. We ended up dating. And it was like this for a short period of time, but it was just this like, I think that was one of the first times that I had followed that nudge that I was like, oh, I understand. Like, granted, was that person my person? No. But like, he actually opened up my world in a big way, in my lens in a big way that I needed to as I was finding my person. And so, because that was a big piece of like what I desired in life and what I was wanting to create for myself, had I not followed that nudge, I probably wouldn't have gotten that message. And had I not gotten that message, maybe I would have never found my now partner, right? Like, I think there's times like this that happen all the time. And so I love using that practice because I think for the people who are just starting this work with their intuition, just build the use case for it. Like it's simply building up proof and then being able to look at that proof and go when you're doubting it, right? To be like, when I follow the nudges, this happens. Like it's not as complicated as we think, and that relationship becomes way more like easier and more obvious over time, right? I also love the idea of playing with like what would you do if you tossed a coin in the air and you have two decisions, and as the coin is tossed in the air, which one do you hope lands? Like I think it can be a really beautiful way to also just practice like forcing our intuition to speak, right? And then paying attention to where it's coming from, like physically in our body, right? Like for some people it's their heart, for some people it's their gut. Me, it's my solar plexus, like almost always, right? And so once you can start to like make these like physical connections, then you can really start to play the game of like tapping into, okay, I know that when I feel that from this place, that's my intuition, but when I hear it from my head, for example, that's my anxiety. And so because that's a big question that everyone starts off with, is they're like, how do I tell the difference between anxiety and intuition? And it's hard at first, but the only way to do it is to practice. And the only way to practice is to have actual resources and tools that you're using consistently, right? Like you can't just expect yourself to be like, I want to be more in touch with my intuition, and then tomorrow you're an intuitively led human. Like it's just not realistic. So yeah, as the process starts, like it starts like this for, we're all intuitive, right? We all have intuitive senses. But if you're looking to create more of a connection with that, because maybe anxiety has become more of your guiding force than you'd like it to be, it's just going to take practice and time. So yeah, write the things down, like right when you have those moments down that you're like, oh, I wonder, what that could be. Do the thing. Um, Go to the coffee shop, like write the poem, whatever it is. And then yeah, use the resources that are going to connect you further, like flip a coin, anything, anything like that to really like force it to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing some practical tips and also some personal stories, because it's so true. And I mean, even for people listening, like you can probably think back on your own life and be like, where did I trust, my intuition and like that nudge, and like something actually came of it that is something that you remember, right? Because those moments are usually very memorable in the beginning, especially. And at the end of the day, I really believe most of us, especially as women, actually like do know, like we are connected to our intuition. We just are not used to trusting it, right? We're not used to honoring it because also we grow up in a society that teaches us to always follow logic, to always follow the mind and weigh things out and go for the safer route and like do things as you should, right? And you're starting to speak a new language, you're following a new compass. Like it does take time to really to trust it, but like it is there, that voice is there. And this is why I love meditation. Like I think meditation or breath work or really anything that brings you into your body and into the present moment is so helpful because it quiets the noise a little bit, and it just like turns up the volume a little bit on your intuition. And from there, yeah, the practice is like, can you trust it? And so I love having a little bit of a track record of like, hey, this is actually all the good that has come when I've done this. And so it like motivates you to just trust it, even if it's scary, even if it defies logic, right? And it's like through that you start to make steps. And I mean, at the end of the day, that is that's literally the key for creating a life that's true to you.
Yeah, it
And
really
that's the
is.
difference between like essentially ending up in a place where you have all the things maybe, but you feel completely empty and dissatisfied versus being so lit up by your life because it's so yours.
Yeah.
So like this
And
is
you
so
made those
big.
choices. Yeah. It's like, I mean, I look back to myself when I was 25, like sitting in that apartment and being like, I should be so happy. Like, even at the time, right? Like, that was exactly what my family wanted for me. Like, the only thing I didn't have in that moment was a partner. And one of my, I mean, finding a partner was actually a big part of my journey of pushing me to like continue to question the status quo of being like, there has to be more. I don't understand why this is just not lighting me up in the way that I thought it would. Like finding, like dating people and just being like, something is drastically missing, but like you check all the boxes. So it doesn't make any, like, it just doesn't logically make any sense. And I imagine that's why a lot of people get into relationships and settle, because on paper, it's exactly what was sold to them, right? Like we are sold, even if we don't buy into it, we are sold a dream. We are sold that we're going to make a lot of money doing something we love, right? That we're going to have a partner and a house and kids and whatever. Not all of us buy into that specific dream, but that is really like the pressure cooker of the culture that we live in. And I was falling into that, right? Like most of my life was a part of it. I grew up with that lens. And so when I started to question it, there was a piece of me that was like, whoa, what's wrong with me that I don't want those things? Like, or I don't want them in the same way that other people want them. And I think it comes back to trust, because you have to sit there and be like, do I trust what I want? Or do I listen to every other voice outside of me that's telling me what I should want? And I think a beautiful way to practice that is just to experiment, right? Like, I'm so grateful that I put myself in that position to, have that job and do that dating style and like, live in that really cool place and all of those things, because it really showed me what I didn't feel comfortable in, right? And when I started to follow my intuition, it was scary, but it was like, well, this is scarier. Like behind whatever is behind me isn't for me, and I recognize that. And so I'd rather not ruin, but I'd rather not waste my life chasing a dream that's not mine. And if I never intuitively said yes to a lot of those little tiny nudges, and I'm telling you that they're tiny for a reason. Like the intuitive nudge was not move to San Diego from I'm from New Hampshire. It wasn't like that wasn't it. It was like it was smaller than that. It was like this little like thread that was like think about your quality of life. Think about just like a tiny aspect of it, not like the biggest picture, like the biggest next step, but the idea was just like to think about it a little bit more. And every time I'd sit with that feeling of like what would my quality of life be, that was what drove my steps, right? Like it wasn't this big massive like overhaul, because that's overwhelming, but it was just this like tiny little like envision what this would be like. And I did. And it kept just growing and growing and growing until I finally was like, yeah, I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really gets to be one little, I always say, like, follow the breadcrumbs of curiosity, right? Like, they really are
Yeah.
breadcrumbs, and eventually they lead you down a completely different path. And it's moment by moment, it's tuning in, it's listening to like what lights you up, how your body, for me, like it's I mean, I think for everyone, it's like it's in the body, right? Your body like expands or contracts, and like there's these subtle shifts that like a spark of like, ooh, that's exciting, even if it's scary. Like, let me like just explore that, even if it's just like the actual fantasy or the imagination of it. And so with that, I think, just to touch really quickly on how you process emotions, because I think what gets in the way of that a lot is the anxiety, right? The anxiety, the fear, the discomfort, the overwhelm, like all these emotions that are so dense and so heavy that, especially women and people in general, just we've been so taught to suppress emotions that there's just so much pent up energy. And I think that more than anything clouds our intuition the most, because it's like the intuition is so subtle and such whispers, and like you have to be so attuned to it. When there's so much energy in the way, it's really difficult. And so what are some of your favorite ways, or even just talk us through like how you work through emotions and as they come up, how do you alchemize them through your body?
Yeah. It does look different every time, within sort of, right? Like I definitely have my ways these days, but typically for me, it's through dance, it's through movement. I feel and I also recognize that I grew up dancing, so I'm very comfortable moving my body that way. And I also recognize that not everyone is. But for me, when I start to feel a lot, like when the feeling comes on, and it's sort of like how I know it's getting serious is like there is nothing else that I can focus on. Like it is the only thing in my awareness. That's usually my sign that I am I am way better off feeling it right now than pushing it off later, right? I think when we push things off later, we pay interest on them, and that's my theory. And so in those moments, I actually have playlists loaded into my Spotify specific to my emotions that I'm feeling, right? And so if it's anger, I'll put on my anger playlist and just shuffle it and just let it rip. And like that is oftentimes what ends up happening is it's like a minute and then I'm exhausted and then I'm like on the floor crying, right? Like it's not pretty. It's not something that I would be like excited to show people. And oftentimes like it's so vulnerably raw that I even notice, even when my partner's here, that if he's here, I have a hard time almost like trusting myself to get into it. And I trust him so deeply. So it just goes to show like how vulnerable these emotions are, because yeah, it might, like, logically that doesn't make a lot of sense, but to my, childlike self that's experiencing that emotion in that moment, she's scared. She doesn't want anyone to see this version of her, right? So that's also been a practice. But yeah, and when I say dance, I'm not like eloquently dancing, like doing pirouettes. It's not like that. Though I wish. It's like thrashing. Like it's like violent movements that feel almost like I am not doing them. They almost feel like they're coming from, I don't know, something else. The frequency of that emotion is literally moving through my body, and all I'm really doing in that moment is surrendering to it. And it doesn't last very long. It's quick. Um, and so yeah, that's one of the ways that I typically do that. Or if I am feeling, if my partner's here and I'm like, I cannot do this in front of you, I'll probably just go work out. Like that's the more acceptable, appropriate way of dealing with emotions, right? And I think it's a great start, especially running. I think like throwing on same playlist but just running to it. I have a friend who used to play, like, do like duct tape with the emotion or the feeling on the bottom of her shoe, and she'd run until it was worn off. And I love that. And I think it brings
Mm.
like a physical reminder to the practice that's also deeply spiritual. Um, and so yeah, finding ways where you can connect. I think the biggest piece of it is like connecting why it's happening. Like, don't just move to move, like move with the intention. Yeah, it's completing the stress cycle, right? Like I think that's a big piece of it. And I think that's why I default to movement, because after the movement happens, then the softening happens. And then that's typically when the words come out. Like I write a lot of poetry, so that's when the words come out for me, or yeah, whatever it might be.
Hmm. Yeah, again, if it's emotion is energy and energy needs to be moved, it can't be created nor destroyed. It needs to move and transform. If not, it like gets pent up and it starts expressing through symptoms and health issues, and in other ways we start being more reactive. And yeah, so I think any form of intuitive movement is just so powerful, and not for it to look a certain way, but just to feel it in the moment. And I always tell my clients, like, trust the way that your body's wanting to move it. Like if it wants to cry, if it wants to scream, if it wants to shake, if it wants to like run, like just trust that, and it'll tell you the more that you actually allow it to speak to you, right? And so
Mm,
opening that communication is so beautiful. And yeah, on the other side is like once the dust settles, that's when you find the clarity you've been looking for, but it's been
yeah.
so clouded. And yeah, it's like you've moved the energy, and now the channel is literally open again for intuition to speak to you, for you to find your own answers that are meant for you, that are not coming through force and like trying to figure it out, but just allowing the process to happen. It comes in waves, and that's been such a big theme of my life the past this whole year. Honestly, 2025 has just been like riding the waves as they come, fully ride them to their peak, finish that stress cycle, and then on the other side, boom, the clarity comes. And like I used to get so stuck in these patterns where like there'd be something going on, a challenge that I'm moving through, an emotion that's coming up, and I would get stuck there for like longer periods of time because I wasn't doing that, because I wasn't
Mm,
feeling it, and I was just trying to mentally work my way through it and understand it and force it and like, figure it out. And it doesn't it doesn't resolve itself. Like it's so quick actually when you just feel it, and it is quick, like you were saying, it might last a song or two. Like research and science literally has proven that it takes 90 seconds for a sensation and emotion to pass through if you don't get caught in the story. And that can be tricky, but yeah, it's so quick. And then you start like the momentum starts building in your life, because whatever comes at you while you're, with the intention of growing and expanding and like going after your dreams, like you're constantly presented with new curriculum, but like you move through it, you learn the lesson, and you keep going, and it's just like, whoa, this is a totally different way of living. It's crazy.
yeah. I think that's a big reason why this work has become so important to me. Like, I talk so much about emotional resilience, and it's really just our ability to face any emotion that comes our way. Even there's actually studies that show that joy, like pure joy is one of the hardest emotions for us to feel because it's so vulnerable. And joy,
Mm,
like ecstasy, is it's basically like releasing our identity to self and being with the oneness and releasing our attachment to our identity, right? And so a lot of people can't feel joy because of that feeling. But the real reason, like emotional resilience to me, is being able to, exactly like you said, where you're proving every single opportunity that you have that you aren't going to get hung up on the emotion, that you're going to let it move through you, and then the universe or source or whatever is like, okay, cool, it's like next level, next
yeah.
level, next level, right? It's kind of like a game. And I feel like if you can gamify it, it becomes more like rewarding, where you're like, okay, I passed the test, like now what? And I don't know, I think that part of it for me has become really important because I also struggle with like getting so lost in the etherealness of it, because it can be very ethereal. But like how can we prove that this is actually like up leveling us, right? And like, and isn't that sort of the point, like for us to be evolving? Like, I'm not saying you should have emotional resilience, because I think you should be feeling more sad and angry energy more, or more negative emotions more. I'm just saying that that's life. Like, it's going to happen, especially if you desire a big life. Like, the further you get down the line, the more complicated and challenging it gets, right? But
Hmm.
if you have emotional resilience and you can face those emotions with less fear because you have processes and tools and resources and awareness, well, then you're literally giving yourself a blueprint and a game plan to like go after what you want, right? Like, even when fear pops up, you say, yeah, but I can handle that because I have capacity, because I've built proof that I can do this. And so I think ultimately it creates more of like a confidence in yourself of, yeah, I'm completely okay with feeling a lot, and that might mean anything, but like, I'm okay with that because I know I can handle it.
Yeah. And you can't avoid it anyway. Like, you are a human being, you're going to experience pain, you're going to experience heartbreak, you're going to experience sadness and fear. And if anything, we actually just prolong it when we're not willing to fully feel it in the moment. You know, like there's no avoiding it. And I think people are so scared to feel and not recognizing that you're actually just feeling it at maybe a subtler level, but for a lot longer, which then
Yeah,
becomes a state of being. It becomes a mood, right? And it just, you feel like I'm just, that's like, I think where depression comes in too, is like there's just a lot of suppression that's happened and now you're numb. And so it's, yeah, it doesn't have to be so scary. And you actually, you start to understand what can come of on what comes through feeling it, and you actually feel alive even when you're feeling fear and pain. Like, you're feeling, so you actually feel alive. You don't feel numb and depressed and stuck. You feel like it's actually moving through you, and it can be such a beautiful alchemization into the next thing. And I mean, yeah, that's what we're here for. In my eyes, it's like, we're not here to just check off the list and accumulate the things. Like, that's part of the game. But
mm-hmm.
really, what's, if you want a life that satisfies you, it is the evolution of ourselves. And that only comes through being willing to face life and just move through whatever's coming in the moment. And when you have the tools and the awarenesses and the support, it makes that process so much easier.
Totally. And something I'm thinking of right now is like, no wonder why midlife crises are a thing, you know? Like, I think eventually, so that's so common because we push and shove down and resist so many of these things, right? Like, we follow the path, we do what looks good on paper. We don't feel those feelings because those don't make us more productive, and we climb the corporate ladder, whatever it is, right? And then all of a sudden, we reach that point because there's only so much of that your physical system and energy body can handle before it breaks, before the dam breaks. And like, to the point that you just made, it's like, then it's even more intense, right? Like, it is everything you shoved away. Like, you have been racking up that credit card debt for 35 years, like 40 years. You know, you got interest on that. Like you got to experience that and it's going to suck. And I feel like a lot of the work I'm doing is like to prevent that from ever happening because I'm constantly practicing the feeling, right? Like taking it in doses that I can handle versus all at one time.
Yeah, exactly. When it builds up, it's a lot harder to reverse the train and move it in the other direction. Yeah,
Facts.
so it's and you just like you feel so much lighter and so much more connected and alive when like you don't have all of that energy pent up, right? It's there's so much good that comes of it.
Yeah, you're not as reactive, you're not as like quick on the trigger. There is so much good that can come of it. It isn't just like deeply spiritual. It's like very practically
Mhm.
important too.
Yeah. Yeah, so as we start to wrap things up, I would love to ask you for the person out there who's listening who is very interested in trying psychedelics but very afraid and doesn't really know where to start with it, and also wrapped into this conversation of like feeling your emotions and trusting yourself, like this kind of whole journey that all is so connected. I'm wondering if there's anything that wants to come through to speak to that kind of person that's like so curious and interested but is also just like so scared to take that first step.
Mm. Yeah, the first thing that comes up is I think really building a dialogue and a relationship with that curiosity, being like, why are you so curious to do something that you're so afraid of, right? It's a common dialogue I think that people have where they don't take action on something that like is deeply curious to them but really scares them. And so ask yourself, and maybe even depending on how spiritual you are, start to call on the wisdom of the medicine, especially if it's psilocybin, if it's mushrooms. Ask her for maybe some guidance even though you don't have that true connection with her yet. I think you'd be surprised what you can start to get from just calling on her wisdom and asking her more of why, like, why are you beckoning me, right? Like I am terrified of you and I'm not afraid to say that, but like what do you have for me? And if you're not super spiritual and that seems like you're like that's crazy, take it in a way that you don't want to do medicine from this place of like pure fear because like I said, it's going to amplify that, but fear will always be a person in the room, right? Like I have done many journeys and I am still a little bit afraid when I take the medicine. And I think that's a really healthy way to approach it because above all else these medicines are powerful and like the fear is healthy because you're not walking in thinking I'm better than this. You're walking in being like I am surrendering to this idea. And also, the last thing I'll say is your mind is really powerful. And even people, I've seen this happen where people, you know, say yes to the medicine, they want to do it, and then they get into ceremony and they don't feel anything. Like they take the medicine, nothing happens. They take 4 grams and nothing happens. Your mind will protect you in ways that it feels like it's necessary to. And I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, it just is, right? So, like, trust that your mind knows what to do is really what I'm getting at, and like trust that your mind will have your best interest in mind, and that if you were to approach this work and it wasn't safe, that you'd ultimately be okay because your mind like communicates that to you. Of course, I have like things as immediately as I said that I'm like, and know your markers for safety, right? Like when you are doing high dose journeys, you should never do that by yourself. You should do it with a facilitator who knows that space and that you trust, like that you literally trust, you feel safe with, right? Like you want to make sure that all of those boxes are checked. It's not just a matter of being like, I'm going to go get mushrooms off the street. I'm going to take them in my room because I feel called to this work. Like, if you have a lot of fear, this is actually why, for anyone who's in Colorado or Oregon, why the legal psilocybin model is incredible. We have licensed facilitators, licensed medicine, licensed spaces where you can go do journeys in a completely safe environment. And for the person who is afraid, like deeply afraid, but deeply curious, that can be huge for them because they feel held. They feel like there's a safety plan, like there's an emergency plan if something goes wrong. They know the facilitator's trained. So that's always an option too that you could approach. And it's only available in Colorado and Oregon right now, but New Mexico is not too far behind. And yeah, those are all great places to visit too.
Mm-hmm. We both live in Colorado, so come visit us.
Hmm.
Ah, beautiful. Thank you so much. This has been such a just real and nourishing conversation, and it's so nice to hear, yeah, just about your own journey and kind of the wisdom that you've acquired through living, really, and through living in an intuitive way and trusting and living in communion with nature and all of these beautiful medicines that I'm like, why else would would we be given these psychedelics if it's not to help us on our journey? So if it's used
Hmm.
intentionally, I'm all for it. It's been a huge help in my life, but also it's not everything. Like there's a lot more that gets to happen underneath the surface, and I think we touched on a lot of that and gave some practical tips. So why don't you tell people how they can connect with you, and if they're curious on what it looks like to work with you, like how do they do that?
Yeah, you can connect with me. I'm most active on Instagram at Alexa Ray Joyal. I have a website at it's www.lexjoyal. I know that's confusing. I do go by Lex, so it's yeah, I'm dancing with that. And yeah, working with me, like I said, I do offer 3-month microdosing containers. I only work with microdosing for 3-month periods at a time, so we could talk about that. And I do work without microdosing as well. I'm starting to step into us having the medicine already within us, and we don't always need medicine to show us the path.
Mm-hmm. That is true. You got it all within you. You don't need it, but if there's a curiosity, that could be a route to explore. But beautiful. I will link all of that in the show notes below for people for easy access. But other than that, thank you so much for coming on. I love you so much. I'm so grateful for you. And yeah, for just how you bring your work to the world and do it in all the ways that are just so true to you. It feels beautiful. So I love you. Thank
I
you.
love you. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone, we will catch you next time.